Let's go ahead and call our September 8th, 2020 meeting to order and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I'll start off. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
United States of America, and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible.
liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll take a roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Here.
Trustee Jerome,
Here.
Trustee Kenny,
Present.
Trustee McDonald,
Here.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Knudsen,
Here.
Mayor Hammond.
Here. Any conflicts or any amendments to our agenda tonight? Take it that's a no. Do we have any conflicts of interest tonight? Okay, we'll move on. Public comment. This will be public comment on non-agenda items. You wish to comment tonight on a non-agenda item, please raise your hand in the box and state your name and address, and we'll give you 3 minutes. So let's open it up to the public.
Mr. Mayor, I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Thank you, Crystal. We'll go ahead and move on to our first presentation. This is a water rate survey results. Hallie, Sheldon, the town intern. Ms. Sheldon, what do you have for us tonight?
Good evening. I am just going to share my screen. Right, can you see that? Yes, I see it. Alrighty.
Yep, looks good here.
So this is a presentation based on the data we collected from the water rate survey that was released back in August for residents to complete online, as well as paper copies that were at Town Hall, the Town Annex, and the Post Office. The survey closed on August 24th. So in that survey, there were 12 questions asked of the residents, and we had 727 surveys taken. Really want to thank the residents for taking the time to complete the survey. And then we had 207 public comments and questions within those surveys as well. So a lot of great feedback from our Wellington residents. So I'm going to go through each question so you guys can see just the answers that our residents had for each question. So this question outlines how many individuals lived in the houses of the survey takers. So this kind of demonstrates consumption rates based on how many people are in that each house. So that's helpful for town staff when making future decisions based on water consumption. As you can see, there's definitely, a higher majority in the 1 to 5 range per household. And then this demonstrates how many individuals own their home compared to rent their home. We definitely have much more owners in this population than renters out of the survey takers. Question 4 outlines who pays their water bill. This is helpful for our utility billing services to understand who we are communicating with when it comes to paying water utility bills. And then question 5 outlines how residents were paying their bills. This just demonstrates to the town staff the best places for us to dedicate our resources to ensure that the process is seamless for residents to move forward with paying their bills, because it's an important step. And then with questions 6 through 8, there were a lot of comments from residents just questioning why these were questions on the survey. And the purpose of these kinds of questions is just to show the prioritization of residents' preferences. So when the town decides to move forward with new decision-making processes, we want to know what's most important to the residents of Wellington. So these questions just demonstrate the importance of specific items. So obviously safe drinking water, most residents feel is very important for us to maintain our services to ensure that the water is safe to drink. And then this was discussing the dependability of the water service. So again, residents felt strongly about this, but not as strongly as the safe drinking water question. So that definitely shows a prioritization as well. And then this one was determining the funding for conservation and watershed sustainability. So you can see that there's more in the middle survey takers here, just also demonstrating that the prioritization is over safe drinking water. So question 10 discusses how residents feel when it comes to paying their bill. This kind of just gives us a general understanding of how residents feel about paying their bills in general and can help us with making further decisions when it comes to raising bills. Alrighty. This question demonstrates why we would want to conserve water. So as the town decides to move forward with conservation measures, we want to know that we're prioritizing what we are conserving and why we are conserving them for residents. So again, it shows their prioritization of their conservation methods. And in this data, you can see that human use is definitely the highest prioritization for Wellington residents. So that includes agriculture, business needs, and the future needs of the town. And then this was just a qualifying question for town staff to understand the best way to communicate with residents in the way that they receive their information. Finally, this was the question that we wanted the most information on based on the scenarios that were presented by Mr. Sexton in previous presentations. These are the differing scenarios that we have for the water rate increase. Scenario 1 is the increase of an average of $63 a month all at once, January 1. Scenario 2 is the increase of an average of $17 a month on October 1st, and then the additional $35 a month in January. And then scenario 3 was the increase of $42 a month in October, and then additional $2 a month minimum in January as well. As you can see, scenario 2 and scenario 3 were pretty close, just a difference of 7 residents between the survey takers. So definitely the prioritization is between scenario 2 and 3. And a lot of the comments of why residents chose not sure just was between they didn't generally understand why the increase was happening, as well as not wanting the increase in general. So that was why they chose the not sure option. And then I pulled from the 207 public comments and questions the general themes that we had been seeing among the comments from our residents. And there was a general frustration with the survey. They really preferred there to be an option for no rate increase. There was also this frustration with the rate increase in general and requests that the town consider other options. There was requests for charging developers more to build and to get the water treatment plant built faster. There were some concerns from residents that the pandemic is causing a strain on them already and that they can't afford to have a rate increase. A few comments discussed that this should have been addressed sooner. And we had 1 or 2 comments that said that we should bring bigger businesses to the area to increase the tax base. There's a lot of efforts for conservation. They would like to see more conservation efforts from the town, which includes xeriscaping from HOAs. General comments about the water cost starting being too high and wanting the quality of water to be better. We had 1 or 2 comments about wanting to see a rebate program for efficient toilets and water heads, like seen in other municipalities. And residents would like to see an increase to consumption rates, not base rates, or have the option to see payment plans for the residents who struggle with paying bills in general. And then the next slide is going to talk about questions. These were the most common questions that we received from residents. There was some general misunderstanding about the scenario question. In the scenario question, we used 7,000 gallons of water as the general unit because that is the average water consumption rate per month for a Wellington resident. And there was some confusion where I think residents thought that no matter how much they can consume with water each month, they thought they were going to be charged with 7,000 gallons regardless. So that was a question that was asked pretty frequently. Questions about the water plant being built, why the base rate was increasing so much, why it's so expensive when there's other communities that don't have the same problems. There are a few residents that wanted to know if we could ban grass lawns or if there were other conservation methods that we could institute. They had some questions about where to find an explanation of why rates were being increased, and questions about why they couldn't just be increased a few dollars, and some other questions about town planning and the effects of conservation with town planning and growth. And for just for reference, our FAQ page on our website has all of these questions answered on them already, and I can show you where that is located. So this is our town website, and this is our water utility rate update under our utility billing tab in our departments. And at the bottom of this page are all of the most common questions asked by residents, and they all have answers on them if you click on them. So a resident can go through and see the answers to those questions. And that is all I have.
Okay, board members, any comments on this water rate study and the way the staff put it together? I think it was pretty well covered in a lot of areas. There's quite a bit there to look at and review. I think we tried our best to reach out and explain things, and looks pretty concise and comprehensive. I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to bring anything forward?
I have a quick question for Ms. Sheldon. On question 11, do you mind jumping back to that slide real quick? What is, would you mind providing some clarification? What's the difference between bills 28.9% and the human use 50.5%?
So the difference between those with the conservation is with human use, that is basically saying that residents prefer to conserve water so that when they want to water their fields or have water available for their business needs, that would be their preference of why we conserve water, to ensure that the future Wellington businesses, future agricultural fields will have that water. Whereas paying bills is Wellington residents want their bills to be lower, or they conserve water personally so that their consumption rate is lower to ensure that their bill is also lower in cost.
Thank you for the clarification.
Anyone else?
Great job on the presentation. It looks really good. And I like the FAQs. You did a great job. A lot of these themes, I think, are in line with my conversations with residents. So I'm happy to see that there's nothing in here specifically with the comments that are completely out of right field. that I haven't seen or heard yet. If anything, it says that a lot of the considerations that we've already talked about in working sessions and in other sessions where we've gone through these scenarios are on track as far as what we understand are the concerns and questions of the residents. So I appreciate so many people participating in this because it does give us so much really good feedback. And I appreciate this, how you put it together. It's very easy to consume. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, go ahead.
Just a quick comment. One, just want to agree that I really appreciate you guys getting this together with the FAQ and then having everything up. Is it possible to get the FAQ and the utility rate update added back to the homepage? I know it got pulled off the homepage of our website when we took the surveys down. Just that way people can still access that easily would be great. Yep. And then we are going to be discussing this further in the work session, correct, as far as how this will affect what we vote on at the end of the month. Is that correct? Or is that time for us to discuss now?
No, we're gonna have, we've got another work session coming up, I believe. This is not being discussed, just presentation.
Just wanted to clarify that. So all my other comments I will hold till our work session. Thank you.
That's right. We're gonna go over all this stuff, but I think that putting that FAQ back on there and leaving it on there is a good thing. That's a good thing. That's a lot of work and you did a good job and it's comprehensive. So I appreciate the effort put out there to answer these questions because it's important that people know that we're listening and trying. Okay, Ms. Sheldon, if that's it, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 3. Next presentation is the B Dam project status update. Bob Gowing, please.
Can you guys see that presentation?
Yep.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Trustees. This is Bob Gowing, Public Works Director. I wanted to give you a status update on the work that's been going on for the B dams. That work's been ongoing for almost a year now. And so I'm going to walk you through a real quick progress report, and feel free to ask questions as we go or when we get to the end. So some of the current trustees may not have, were not on the board when this was last talked about. So a real quick history lesson. The B dams, and don't ask me what B stands for because I don't know. I don't think anybody knows that. It's a series of dams that were built by the Soil Conservation Service in the 70s. And
hey, Bob, before
yes.
you move on, isn't B dam, it's a classification of B, right, versus A? Meaning the amount of
it's a series. It's like the B series of dams is what it is.
It's a classification, right?
It's not a hazard classification. It's just the name, really. So real quickly, Box Elder Creek runs down this way. This is Coal Creek, and Indian Creek is over here on the east side of the freeway. B2 and B3 and B4 all sit just immediately north upstream of Wellington. B5 and B6 are up here in the watershed for B2. Again, B2 is on Box Elder. So these dams all kind of work together to create really a very effective flood control system for the town and for downstream municipalities, the county, Fort Collins, Tinmouth, really all the way down to where these creeks merge with the Poudre River and even beyond a little bit. So in general, they're all large earthen dams. There's an outlet works, a principal spillway, and an emergency spillway. And these dams are currently maintained by North Poudre Irrigation Company. NPIC was the original sponsor for this series of projects back in the 70s. And as part of that, they agreed to maintain these ponds, or these dams rather. So important to note, and again, I mentioned how effective these dams are as flood control structures. This graphic over here on the right is what the 100-year regulatory floodplain would be without the dams in place. And you can see this white area right here is the town of Tinmouth, as Fort Collins down here. So in general, if the dams weren't there, the floodplain would be much, much wider, deeper, and higher velocities if the dams weren't there. So keep in mind that the actual floodplain with the dams in place, most of this floodplain is contained in the box elder improvements that were done, including the channelization projects along Box Elder Creek and Coal Creek. And of course, the whole series of Box Elder stormwater improvements were designed under the assumption that the dams would be in place. So if the dams weren't there, everybody would be subject to much larger floodplains, but it would also kind of invalidate the whole design principle behind the box elder improvements. The box elder improvements just wouldn't work at that point because the incoming flow rates would be so much higher.
Hey, Bob. Bob,
yeah.
Before you move on, back to that map, you said that white area was Tinmouth. For clarification, is that Wellington or Tinmouth?
This is Wellington. I'm sorry if I
There
said
you go.
Tinmouth. This
All
is the town of Wellington right here.
Okay, good enough.
Yeah, Tinmouth is off the map to the south.
That's right. Thank you.
Sorry about that. In the mid 2010s, the NRCS, the old Soil Conservation Service, kind of morphed into the National Resource Conservation Service, NRCS. They, well, right before that, so the state reclassified these, the B2 and B3, to a high hazard classification. A high hazard classification basically means that there's been enough growth downstream of the dams, or conditions at the dam have changed in such a way that if it failed, there would be a high likelihood of risk to human life and property and the environment. So these got reclassified to a high hazard, which requires a much higher standard, a performance standard. So the NRCS, working with the local communities that I mentioned before, completed 2 studies, one for B2. Here's the cover sheet of the one for B2. This is a 400-page document. There's a dam hazard study in here. There's a very detailed analysis of the consequences of a dam failure, and some preliminary or conceptual analysis for what kind of improvements should be made to the dam. They also did an environmental assessment back then. At that time, cost estimates were anywhere from $25 million to $30 million to perform those 2 projects on B2 and B3. The original amount was a little over 20. They did a subsequent study that bumped it up, and then there were still some finalization to do on the options. So in general, we were looking at, and this was a cost to be borne, 35% of this would have been borne by the participating communities. Again, Wellington, Larimer County, Fort Collins, and Tinmouth, and North Poudre Irrigation Company. At that time, in 2016 and 17, the communities were not able to agree on a cost-sharing plan. I think the sheer amount of the cost was obviously shocking at the time, and so it basically just went on the back burner, and it stayed on the back burner until NRCS contacted those members and said, we're going to cut funding, which would have paid for that 65% cost match, if the communities don't get together. Someone needs to commit to the 35%, basically. Someone needs to commit to operations and maintenance and some other things like that, or we're going to not rebudget it. They were just going to let it expire, basically. So at that time, the communities got together, And you'll recall last year we brought to the board an IGA to for $50,000 a piece for the different participants or stakeholders to hire an engineer, go back and do several things. So that was approved by the board, and we entered into contract with SEH. SEH at the time, and still is, on the county's on-call consultant list. We thought we were under a deadline where we had basically about 6 months to either decide who was going to participate in this project or who wasn't. That kind of got relaxed later, but we did start immediately with SEH to review the work that had been done, the older work in 2016 on B2 and B3. Take a look at B4, because that was soon to be reclassified, but it hadn't been studied before. Determine if we needed additional work for B5 and B6, which are again upstream of B2. Work with the stakeholders in the state engineer's office to reevaluate the recommendations as a whole using new state criteria. If the NRCS was to continue to manage this project, they have a set of rules for dam safety, which is quite a bit stricter than the state's rules. So we would have had to follow that previous, the NRCS's criteria, which, as I say, is quite rigorous and would have led us back to the $25 to $30 million series of projects. So we talked to the state engineer's office. They said, the NRCS said, that's fine if you want to do that. We may or may not participate, but the point of this study was to see if using the state criteria, we couldn't come up with, frankly, a more manageable project and still ensure that people were safe downstream. So the idea was to prepare some conceptual improvement plans if needed and develop kind of a cost-sharing proposal for stakeholder review and potential future use. At this point in time, in the IGA that was approved last year, there was no commitment to proceed further on anybody's part. We were just going to get through this study and then see where we ended up. And just to show you what some of these dams look like, this is B2, and that is about a mile long, 40-foot high earth embankment. It's a huge earthen dam. This is the principal, the auxiliary concrete spillway. The principal spillway is this little dot right here, which I'll show you a picture of that in a minute, that discharges into this creek. B3 is also a large earthen dam with also an earthen spillway around the side. The principal spillway is right here. Before I leave this slide, just kind of, yeah, so that cost was to be shared by the 5 partners. There's a picture of the embankment, which driving by you wouldn't necessarily say, well, that's a pretty important dam. But I believe that's B2. It, like I said, is about a mile long and quite tall. This is a principal spillway right here, which is a concrete structure on the upstream side in the pond in the impoundment area itself. I believe that this is B6 right here, which is located up in the foothills towards the north. So the results of that study, working with the SEO, and they were fantastic to work with on this project. They were just finishing up that new set of criteria and agreed to kind of pilot these projects under that new criteria to work out the bugs in their criteria, to kind of vet that criteria, and if all those things worked out right, we would just use that for the hazard study and the flood mitigation study that we needed for this project. So in general, that new criteria or new process relied on state modeling techniques using state data. Probable failure modes, which is basically means how does the dam fail? How quickly does it fail? What does it look like when it fails? Are there any precursors to failure? And kind of a whole range of analyses based on the failure modes. The consequences of failure, which obviously would be increased flood damage to property, hazard to life, and ecological, environmental damages and things of that sort. And, you know, once that was done, some potential mitigation measures. So the results of that study indicated that B2, B3, and B4 have a low or a low-ish likelihood of failure, but a high probability of loss of life and property damage if they fail. So I am going to flip over to one of the letters that we got from them. If I can get to that. Can you guys see that? The letter. Let me reshare. Yep, you can see that. So this is kind of the conclusion of that work. And again, this was the stakeholder team, which generally consisted of myself and kind of the senior flood control or engineering staff from the county, Tinmouth and Fort Collins, and our consultant. And I won't go into just a whole lot of depth, but this little table right here, or chart, is fairly key. You can see that likelihood of failure runs from remote to very high. We're in this low category with 4 levels of consequences, with 1 being the least and 4 being the highest. So we fall in this little square, which these green squares, either low likelihood and or low consequences, require less work than, say, if you're up here with very high likelihood of failure and a lot of consequences of that failure. So this really just explains, is almost an executive summary of the hydrologic and hydraulic work that was done as part of the study. Here's a little table that summarizes the results. In general, B2 still overtops slightly in the probable maximum flood event. The probable maximum precipitation is roughly 30 inches. And when that 30 inches falls, the probable maximum flood is the result. And that's kind of the standard for high hazard dams in terms of the H&H work. So you can see right here, when I was mentioning how effective these dams are, the flow rates in are about 17,000 cubic feet per second, and the flow rate out is a little over 300 cubic feet per second, which I've worked on a lot of dams, and this is one of the most effective flood control structures I've ever seen. So there's some reference to rules. And when you get down to the end, this is, won't go into a lot of detail, but there's the crest, there's the critical PMF event. You can see it does exceed the crest. This line is where the emergency spillway engages, and all that data crunching kind of went into the results, the simplified results that I just showed you. So I'll just kind of go to the end where there is some discussion about recommendations. So their recommendations are that there are a few things we need to do to support the larger recommendation that no structural improvements are required for any of the 3 that we looked at, B2, B3, and B4. And those are to provide clear designation of ownership and responsibility for O&M, operations and maintenance, and a decision-making process for those. Funding should be directed towards regular maintenance and repairs to ensure that the dam operates safely throughout its life, which is basically indefinite. A robust emergency action planning program should be used to mitigate consequences Existing available funding should be used for focused improvements for instrumentation. This is an early warning system. Inundation mapping is just some mapping that goes with the EAP. And while enlarging the spillway may further reduce the likelihood of an overtopping event, enlarging beyond a certain point may result in adverse impacts, and that's part of that whole analysis. So really the takeaway from this is that we don't need to make any structural improvements to any of the 3 dams that we studied, B2, B3, and B4. We do need to implement a flood warning, warning system to alert downstream communities if and when a flooding event happens, and that basically happens when the emergency spillway engages. So as soon as the flow gets high enough, a big enough storm comes around to force flow through the emergency spillway, we're going to see significantly higher flows. Everybody downstream is going to see higher flows than the 100-year. And of course, some monitoring, real-time rainfall monitoring with a weather station and some depth sensors and things of that sort, so that we have clear and real-time indication alerts related to the possibility of flooding and or failure of this dam. And of course the EAP, the Emergency Action Plan, which would lay out a plan for us and the other jurisdictions to respond to that event, which could be a simple flooding event or a more catastrophic flooding event if we were to get something like the probable maximum storm. So that's the presentation. You will see in the CIP budget, proposed budget for next year, it will be coming your way soon, some budget for the early warning system. We're working through the cost of that now, and kind of a cost share, who pays for what percentage of that based on an assessment of who's frankly got the most risk. The total cost for that is looking like about $120,000 to put in place. There'll be ongoing maintenance for that. And then we're also hammering out some responsibilities between the 4 entities or 5 entities, including North Poudre, for how to apportion out operation and maintenance of the dams themselves. And we'll also be putting together an EAP as part of this effort. So you basically see some money in the budget for the EAP preparation and the flood early warning system that would be part of this. And that's about it.
Okay, good presentation, Bob. Sounds like good news, a lot better than what we started with. Board members, project hands. Any questions at this point?
Mr. Gowing, has has this information been submitted to the county as part of their hazard mitigation plan process?
Yeah, so we've been keeping them up to date and have made flooding one of the hazards that the town and the rest of the communities want to make sure is addressed in that HMP. The county representatives were basically Mark Peterson, the county engineer, Eric Tracy, one of their engineers, the senior stormwater engineer from Fort Collins, and the same for Tinmouth. So all those folks are also participating in the hazard mitigation plan.
Thank you.
Everyone else?
This is Tim Whitehouse. I have to say, from where we started, price tag of 30 million for 2 dams and down to less than, like 150,000 a portion. I don't know if that's individually but that's a dramatic, it's great news. So, I mean, just out of curiosity, how many hundreds of pages of reports that and all this work? This is a huge task.
Right. Well, the previous iteration back in 2015, 16, resulted in 2 400-page studies, 2 environmental assessments. That was about $1 million worth of work that really the NRCS invested in that version of the project. Currently, we're still below that $250,000 budget, and that report is also quite thick, especially if you include all the analyses. But the amount of study that's gone into this has been pretty astounding, and I think the board made an extremely good decision when they directed staff to move forward in this kind of participatory way with the other affected communities, because what that did was put us all at the table. We all had the same issue. We all hated the previous version of the project. We were all highly motivated to come up with a better way to analyze and solve this problem. And the state engineer's office really responded to that, and they worked quite hard as well. They put together some of the hydrologic studies as well for this. So it was a true team effort, and a pretty good example of what you can do when you get the right people sitting down at the table that are willing to talk to each other.
Well, I just wanted to compliment you and your staff and getting it seems like a great resolution from where we started. And again, it's a lot of work with a small staff. And so thank you very much.
It's our pleasure.
Anyone else? Okay, Bob, thank you very much. And I bet you read every page in those documents.
I did. I even put some of them together.
Appreciate it very much. That's good news. Thank you. We'll move on. Item C, the consent agenda, July 28, 2020, regular Board of Trustees meeting minutes. Any issues from the board on these meeting minutes that you want to bring up?
I didn't have any issues in specific. I just had a question for town clerk. Have we gone away from including board members' comments in the minutes? I noticed there were no comments from the board. So I didn't know if that was an intentional change that we were moving away from that.
It is not an intentional change. There was some issues with the recording from that meeting.
I didn't get that. Can you repeat, please, Crystal?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That is not a change that we're making. There was an issue with the recording from that meeting.
Did you get that, John?
She said Crystal said there was an issue with the recording from that meeting, and that's not intentional. Moving forward, we will capture it. It was an issue on Zoom with the recording.
Got it. Okay, that was it. Other than that, I just noticed that. So other than that, it looks fine to me.
Anyone else? Anything? Okay, that's the case. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, July 28, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knudsen,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond,
Yes. Okay, we'll move on. The action items. D1, resolution number 29, 2020, vault water rate increase. Tyler. Tyler?
All right, so good afternoon, Mayor, Board of Trustees, Tyler Sexton, Interim Finance Director. So as you guys are aware, it's fees for both the residents and the developers. Staff believes that bulk water rates need to be evaluated to ensure fair equity among all users. Resolution 29, 2020 brings the bulk water fees to reflect our current water costs. So the is located at 4021 Grant Avenue, and the current cost per 1,000 is $6.25. This graph shows the usage from 2019 and 2020. We are expecting a slight decrease in 2020 due to the bulk water station being under repair, but still anticipating roughly 245,000 gallons used. So I determined the bulk water station uses 0.84% of our total water usage. I was able to break that into an acre foot. Bulk water station uses 7.98 acres. I was then able to combine the cost to purchase and treat the water from the North Poudre to cost roughly $3,935 per year. And that amounts to $15.20 per 1,000 gallon. So Resolution 29/2020 to increase station rates to 50 cents. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have any.
Okay, can we get our screen back?
Yes.
Board members, your turn. Any questions?
So I did have a question, Tyler. So basically, we're just going from what we were charging before to you're basically just changing the price rate to what we're paying to purchase and to treat the water, correct?
That is correct, Trustee Gator.
Anyone else?
I would also point out, this Brad March, that the ordinance also affords the town administrator and the public works director the ability to adopt rules, which we can do under the code for uses of public property that would basically be enforcement rules, which was something that was mentioned at the last meeting.
Okay, so yeah, I know I was the one that brought that up, Mr. March. So that would, yeah, I noticed that. So that would allow us to basically enforce no commercial use of the bulk water station if we need to?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a question for Brad, John?
It was, he answered it.
Oh, okay, all right. Anyone else?
I guess I got a couple of comments.
Sure.
I like the idea of raising the rates to make it more equitable to those folks using that bulk station. Something I think that we should really heavily consider is upgrading our technology at that station and make it so we have the ability that folks, they have to come in and sign up to get a card, or, you know, I don't know how it would shake out, but basically be like a tap fee for builders. You know, if they want to take advantage of that bulk station, they would have to come in and sign up. I don't know if we'd have them pay a tap fee or whatever that may be, but I think that would enable us to enhance control over who is using that bulk water station. So if you're required to come in and, you know, fill an application stating what the purpose of the water is going to be, you know, if you have a cistern, you live up north of town, whatever that may be, then you're issued a card. We know what that use is going to be. So if a contractor or construction company or of that nature, they can't just pull up to that machine if it's not in what, you know, are we gonna pay a town employee to sit on a chair and watch, make sure everybody that comes in, you know, is supposed to be using that bulk station. So, you know, obviously it's not something that can be done right at this moment, but I think it's something that we really need to explore going forward.
John, did you have another comment, or is that it?
Which John?
Trustee Jerome, did you have another comment or not?
Nope, I was finished.
I guess not. Okay.
Cut out.
Anyone else? That's something that we certainly think about down the road for sure. We also ought to upgrade the way we pay for it down there at the cash machine.
That's all.
Go ahead.
You'll also see that in the 5-year plan, the
Okay,
cost
good,
for that.
because that makes a lot easier. And if there's some way of registering how we can use that water more effectively, that'd be good to do. That's only a good sense to do that so we can regulate it. If the board has no other comments, let's turn it over to the public.
Pardon me, Mr. Mayor, I do have
Yes.
a comment. So I was curious to know about the enforcement issues. Living right next to, well, just down the street from the bulk water station, I've certainly seen a number of commercial users filling up, and I didn't know what the enforcement or what we can do about that. I mean, they're not stealing public services like hooking to a hydrant, but we're trying to limit their access or use of this resource. So I didn't know if what steps are taken to address that situation.
I may be able to answer that somewhat. This is Brad again. There is an ability in our code to administratively adopt rules and regulations relative to the use of public property, which the water station would be. One of the things that I understand, and Mr. Gowing can fill in the blank, or fill in the holes if I got them, but one of the things that I understand is that there is currently signage posted that says you're not supposed to use the bulk water station for construction purposes. We can make that a regulation at some point if need be. And I gather there were some lapses. Those have not been seen further. We can adopt a regulation through the town administrator and the public works administrator that indicate that you can't use it for construction. And at that point, if people are found using the water for that purpose, they can be cited and brought into the municipal court.
Just curious, any consideration about putting a camera up there? I mean, obviously the staff at the Public Works building has way more important things to do than try to monitor this station. Is that something that might have been considered? So if there is an issue, it could be reviewed and you sort of have the evidence?
We are looking at that, Trustee Whitehouse, and the cost of cameras have come down quite a bit. So as you said earlier, it is difficult for us to monitor it. We really don't have a lot of windows facing out to that from the shop, and we certainly aren't able to station a person out there all day, every day. But a lot of the folks that work out of that shop, they'll whenever they go somewhere, they'll stop by the window and see what they see. So we are taking pictures when we see a commercial truck there. We send them a letter saying this water's not to be used for construction. Please avail yourself of other bulk water stations throughout the region and that kind of thing. So a lot of that is looking like kind of customer / public information right now.
Anyone else? Okay, let's turn it over to public comment, please.
Mr. Mayor, I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. There's nothing else to say. Can I get a motion to approve resolution number 29-2020, the bulk water rate increase?
So moved.
I'll second that, Trustee Whitehouse.
Let's take a roll call.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knudsen,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on. Next item, action item, D2, the annexation agreement and development agreement for Poudre School District Subdivision. Staff presentation, Cody Bird.
Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. Cody Bird, Planning Director. You've seen this item on your agenda a couple of times already. I think what you're going to see tonight is this is really more of an update again. We are continuing to work on the annexation and development agreements with the school district. We've had a couple of meetings with their staff and conversations with a couple of their board members, and we've made some good progress. There's still a little bit of work to do, but I wanted to kind of highlight for you what the remaining items are, and explain a little bit about what kind of challenges we're working through. The first kind of item that, excuse me for a second while I pull up my other screen. The first item is really identifying the final numbers for the raw water contribution requirement. We've got a pretty good handle on what the anticipated demand for the site is, for just the portion that the school district is developing now. One of the final questions is whether or not the learning park area, which is kind of the courtyard in the building, if that's going to be using non-potable irrigation for that area, or if it wants to be using town treated water. Staff has expressed a desire that they use their non-pot system for that irrigation. The school district has some concerns about the hardness of the water, spotting the concrete, the windows, and other things that would increase their maintenance responsibilities. They are exploring their options for how they can treat that area, and we're working towards a kind of final resolution so we know whether it's going to be treated or non-treated water. The other items that we're continuing to work on include, oh, and I wanted to point out too in your staff report, I identified a couple of these remaining items as kind of a staff working through that, or whether there was some policy considerations needed from the board. That first one on the final raw water contribution number, that would be a staff item. The second item is whether or not we want to do water share dedications with cash in lieu or a combination thereof. This has been discussed a couple of times with the staff level. We've basically supported a combination of shares and cash based on what the school district has available for their water portfolio. They've kind of stated a general agreement with that philosophy. That is a decision that has to ultimately be made by the board in the form of that development agreement. So if that is something that the board has a strong preference on, it would be helpful for staff to know that so that we can address those comments in the development agreement appropriately. The next item is the cost and timing of requirements for off-site road project. This is the intersection of Highway 1 with County Road 9 and County Road 62E, as well as the intersection of County Road 9 and County Road 62E. This is really a 3-intersection configuration that really needs to be a different type of configuration for the ultimate design of that intersection, those intersections. The town is currently underway with a study of those intersections to determine what the ultimate design would look like. And we're working through that with our consultant. The consultant is also going to identify the planning level cost estimate for the selected design improvements and a pro rata share approach, or what are the, in other words, what are the expected parties to that funding so that we can identify those dollar amounts and approach those developers at the time the new developments come online. The school district would be just one party to that approach, as would be the town, Larimer County, CDOT, and future developments. And then the last item that we're still working on, very much a staff level item, just identifying what the estimated costs are for public improvements so we can satisfy the requirement for the warranty period for those improvements. Pretty straightforward approach. We're just trying to get some final information together to reach that agreement and drop those numbers up. So with the remaining items that still need a little coordination, we are recommending tabling this item to a future meeting, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions, board members?
This is Trustee Whitehouse. Yes, I had a couple of questions for you, Mr. Byrd. So on the 2 items in your that are outstanding, it says policy consideration by the Board of Trustees. Would that occur at the September 22nd meeting or after that meeting to work out some of the finer details, please?
At this point, I don't suspect that we're going to have everything finalized by the 22nd. It's obviously a great goal, and we'll be working with the school district to try to reach that. But it's very possible that the final decision might be made in October.
Anyone else?
I just have a comment about that, the non-pot or the water for the courtyard. I think we should, I mean, with all the water issues that we're talking about today and in the future, I don't see how we could, in good conscience, allow water to be used in that fashion that's treated. I think that, in my mind, that should be just completely taken off the table, that, you know, they need to use their non-pot water and figure out how to treat it. I sat and listened to a bunch of testimony last week for the NIST project, and several of the scientists speaking said that they can't believe that any municipality would allow any new construction or any development to allow potable water for anything other than home use. No irrigation, no lawns, no nothing. That should be stopped completely. So I thought it was pretty interesting information that they threw out there. But as far as that goes with the high school, I think they just need to figure out how to use their non-pot water for that water feature.
Would also be in agreement with that. I mean, I don't know if that's something the whole board needs to decide on and inform town staff, but I would agree with Trustee Jerome. I'm fine with them if they need to figure out some system for their non-pot to address the issues with concrete that we're trying to, you know, put water in people's houses. I'm not really worried about concrete.
In the work session that we had with the Poudre School District Board, they were favorable to looking at some sort of system to be able to switch between their potable and non-potable system. So they're looking at redesigning a mechanism so that it could be used on primarily non-potable. Mr. Bird, do you remember their justification other than it just being hard water as to why they wanted to be on potable water?
Yeah, Trustee McDonald, and thank you for bringing that up, because you're right. The school district is working towards an alternative where they could have primary.
Speak up a little bit, Mr. Bird. I can barely hear you.
Sure, sorry about that. Trustee McDonald is correct when she said that the school district is looking at alternatives to allow their non-pot system to provide the primary water source. I think the reason they still wanted to have an option for the treated water was really essentially a redundancy. They had some concerns that during certain times of the year, they would not have the water or their system may be down, and the treated water would be the backup supply for that. The Learning Park area, the way they have that designed, would need to be constantly maintained and adequately maintained to keep the vegetation in that courtyard space, and so that was their concern.
So I guess the only concern that I have on that is, do we have any control to make sure that they, if we do give them the option of doing a non-potable with a potable backup, is there any control mechanism to make sure that they don't, you know, a year and a half after they open the school to just say, oh, we're just gonna use the potable? Or is that kind of a, we just hope that they actually stick to using the non-pot as primary?
Yeah, so Trustee Gator, in at least partial response to your question, I think that we can do that. Part of the proposal that our staff had from the beginning, if this was to be allowed to be treated water, was that it would have to be on a separate meter, and so we could control or monitor its usage. And additionally, our staff had expressed some concerns that if the entire community is on watering restrictions for outdoor use, that we didn't necessarily want to see the school district irrigating the area there when everyone else is on restrictions. And I think they understand the situation that we presented, and were agreeable in concept to putting a separate meter on it, potentially with a valve that could be shut off by the town if we had to.
Any other comments?
Well, I do have a comment or a question. I'm not sure what our agenda for the upcoming work session is. Is this an item to discuss the cash in lieu and would that be an appropriate subject, or is there space available at that meeting? I'm not sure what might be scheduled.
Well, I don't know that, I haven't seen the work session, but this is going to come to a work session so we can talk and bring back to you what they've worked out and as they continue along. So yes, I anticipate it coming to a work session so that we can discuss all these things before we take it to a regular board meeting. Isn't that, well, that's the road we're headed down, right, Cody?
That would be fine, and we have an opportunity for that work session next week, I believe. So I can work with Ms. Hallie to see if we can put that together on the agenda.
Yeah, see if you can. I mean, you may not be able to, you might not be at a point to answer a lot of this stuff, but we can at least talk about where we're headed.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, all right. So it doesn't look like staff's recommending us to move to table the annexation agreement and development agreement to the September 22nd, 2020 meeting at this point. Is there any objection to doing that, or because I'm not anticipating opening this up to the public? Is that correct? That's what we're going to do. Someone want to advise me on that?
I had a question. I don't know I'm opening to public, but my question would be if we're going to talk about this in a work session, it has to make it on this next work session, or if we can't get it on this next work session, then we should table the item till the 4th meeting in October, which would be quite a delay because we only have the one work session next week between this last meeting in September and our first meeting in October. So I guess that would just determine if we're concerned about not having it ready for the work session this next week, then maybe we should table it to the October meeting.
What do you think about that, Cody?
I would suggest that.
Sorry, Cody. I'm sorry to talk over you, Mr. Byrd.
Go ahead.
But based on the conversations that we had with the Poudre School District and staff, I think we're trying to work towards having a definitive decision by the board in early October. So I think it would be prudent to move forward with providing direction to have a discussion relative to these two items in the next work session.
Certainly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Cody.
No, I agree with Trustee McDonald. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay. Let's get it on the work session so we start talking about it. Then we'll go from there. So with that being said, so we're going to make a motion or entertain a motion to table this annexation agreement and development agreement to September 22, 2020. Can I get a motion?
This is Trustee McDonald, so I'll second.
Okay, we'll take a roll call.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Potential Newsom,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on. Item D3. This is a proposed ordinance. An ordinance that's going to be concerning the regulation of retail and medical marijuana stores in the town of Wellington. This is going to be a staff presentation by Brad March.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the board packet is a fairly lengthy memo that I did over the weekend.
Yeah.
It was discovered that as the board's aware, there were two proposed initiated ordinances that were presented to the clerk for the board to consider. The way an initiated ordinance works, matters are initiated by the voter, can be initiated by the voters by getting 5% of the electorate who voted in the last election to sign a petition. Two petitions, one for the sale of marijuana, retail and medical, one for taxing of that marijuana, were submitted to the clerk. The clerk found them to be sufficient, and they then went out and got 5% of the requisite signatures. their goal, their desire, as stated to the clerk, as I understand it, was that that would then be put on the November 3rd election. Unfortunately, we didn't get it there in time. You have to have, and I cited the statute requires you have to have a certain amount of time before you can put it on the November 3rd date. And you can't have anything on the ballot for a period of time on either side of the November 3rd date. And unfortunately, we missed that by a bit. I contacted the county election office today to see if perhaps we could get on the coordinated election ballot still, and I was told that was not possible, which I think the board was already aware of. That being said, what we do need to do tonight is if there is a desire on the part of any of the trustees to introduce a motion to place to have the board adopt the proposed initiated ordinance, you can do so. That is the sales tax, or the sales of marijuana ordinance. The Tabor ordinance has to be approved by the voters. That said, I think the first question is whether, Mr. Mayor, if you want to entertain a motion to adopt, for the board to adopt as a ordinance, the board, the proposed initiated ordinance for the sale of marijuana, you should entertain that motion. You've seen my memo that suggests that I have concerns with the form of the motion. But
Okay.
If the board does not adopt that tonight, then it ultimately needs to go to the voters. So
Sure.
the board ought to have an opportunity to do that.
At this time, this is item D3, Brad. If it's up to me, I'm not interested in entertaining a motion to adopt this ordinance.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay,
Moving on, I would suggest that based on the fact that we are not going to make the November 3rd election,
right.
that you table items 3, 4, 5, and 6. I would make that suggestion for a number of reasons. As you know, this has been a fairly quickly moving target just because of the time frame surrounding the way this initiative was introduced. I sent Friday. I tried to get a hold of the attorney who was representing the proponents of the ordinance, and that attorney indicated he was going to try and get back to his client. We exchanged cell phone numbers to try and find each other over the long weekend. I never heard from them. I sent a copy of my memo as well as a suggestion we probably ought to chat first thing this morning. I did get a call back from him at 2:15 and was unfortunately in a meeting. As I got out of that meeting, it was a bit after 5. I tried to call him at the same time at 5 o'clock. He sent me a memo or an email, and I'll just relate it to the board in concept. Thank you for your effort to communicate today. I left you a voicemail around 2:15. As we've discussed, Prosperous Wellington, which is the proponent of this measure, believes it has met the statutory requirements to have the initiative placed on the November 3rd, 2020 election ballot. As such, it wishes to proceed with the initiatives approved by the clerk and for which she issued statements of sufficiency. Additionally, Prosperous Wellington believes that the initiatives are legislative in nature and not subject to premature rejection by the town clerk or board of trustees, citing the cases. Prosperous Wellington further believes that statutory references to the old marijuana code are at worst Scrivener's errors, that principles of statutory construction dictate should be construed to reference the corresponding relocated reenacted provisions. I do not yet have confirmation of my client's availability for a protest hearing, but believe that a hearing during the middle of next week should be feasible. I will do my best to confirm availability by the morning. Please let me know the result of the board's vote tonight. It would be my suggestion, we have had 2 protests filed, one by Trustee Jerome, that somewhat center on my memo. The suggestion I would make is the protest hearing has to be within 5 days of the filing of the protest, which was today, or 5 days have to elapse, and within 10 days. So it has to be either, we'd be looking at early next week to late next week. I've talked to the municipal judge, who we have suggested be designated as the hearing officer based upon her impartiality. And she has indicated that she would hope that she could either do it on Wednesday, do a hearing on Wednesday or Friday. So we'll try and follow that up. The municipal judge has an obligation then of issuing a decision relatively quickly. Then matters, if there are appeals, can go to the court. Again, as laid out in my memo, that's a statutory procedure. Crystal checked this afternoon with her guru at elections, and I think her conclusion, and Crystal, feel free to chime in, but the conclusion was that the setting of the election should be put off, as should the other issues relative to ballot titles and that sort of thing, until after the protest has been heard. What the statute says, and it's not entirely clear, but what the statute says is that you will, if you don't adopt tonight their proposed ordinance, that you will forthwith publish the proposed ordinances. Other ordinances are published, and shall refer the proposed ordinance in its form proposed or petitioned for to the registered electors. I think that can be done at our next meeting, and would suggest that we get through this protest process in order to, and we get a hold of the proponents in order to see if we can get a little bit more orderly resolution of this thing. Based upon that, I would suggest that you table items 3, 4, 5, and 6, which would be setting the special election, appointing election judges, and referring this to the voters. We would likely be looking at an election based upon the timeframes involved in the statute, somewhere between December 7th and January 17th. And we'd probably be better able to set that after talking to the proponents and seeing if we can, again, do this in a bit more orderly fashion. Therefore, I'd suggest we table 3, 4, 5, and 6. I would suggest that we adopt 7, item 7 on the agenda, which would be the resolution appointing the municipal judge as the protest hearing officer. These items are largely legal in nature. The statute provides that generally the clerk would be the one who would make decisions relative to setting the, or determining whether the proposed ordinances were appropriate. She indicated to me, and again, Ms. you can feel free to chime in, but she indicated to me she wasn't particularly comfortable doing that, and the judge seems to have a better background for doing it. She's very familiar with this area of the law. She was a Fort Collins city attorney when they adopted their ordinances, and then went on to become a Loveland city attorney when they adopted theirs. So she has indicated that she would be willing to act as the hearing officer.
Okay, so Brad, tabling 3, 4, 5, and 6, and going to a municipal judge to hear the protest, is this just to clean up the language and the procedure?
No, the problem is there are some general questions, as I understand it, from the protesters, and I gather the protesters have relied on my memo in part, but I've not seen the protests. I saw I was contacted by Melissa Whitehouse, who's one of the protesters, and
okay.
She had some concerns and asked some questions. I sent her some stuff back, but short of that, what the purpose of the protest is you can protest any part of the ordinance, which includes both signatures, circulators. There's a variety of things. What those protests have done, I think, is largely key to my memo, and say for the reasons set forth or my concerns set forth in the memo, the protesters don't feel that the ordinance is appropriate. Part of that, and it was responded to by Mr. Baum, the proponent's attorney, but part of that is just key to the fact that it's citing to codes that as of January 1st won't even exist, and citing the wrong statutory locations within the Colorado revised statutes. There are other things, as related in the memo, that are also of concern. But those issues ought to be something that can be ruled upon, or at least presented to the municipal judge,
right,
within the next week and a half.
So the judge would hear these protests that are basically, I don't know, an injunction of a vote or something going to the public as a vote to clarify any issues with the process and the ordinance. Not
the propriety.
Weighing in on the merits of the thing, right?
Well, as I read the law, and this is why we have judges, I can have one read, judges can have another, obviously.
Okay.
In this case, the judge is being appointed as the hearing officer, that would normally be the position held by the clerk. Our municipal judge would look at that. Again, I can't speak highly enough for her integrity. She would be extremely impartial. Have her look at it. In the event that she concludes that there are problems, then the proponents can take it to the court. In the event that she concludes that the proponents are correct, and for example, they're just Scrivener's errors, then this can proceed on and the board can be so advised. And at that point, we'll present the ordinance to the voters, which we were planning on doing tonight.
Okay. All right, board members, any comments?
For clarification, did you say the hearing could be had within 10 days, so it could be had prior to the next board meeting?
Yes, ma'am, it has to be within 10 days by statute.
Thank you.
So the judge has told me that she could handle this hearing, and I'm awaiting, I need to get a hold of Mr. Baum by tomorrow, but she can have this hearing a week from Wednesday or a week from Friday.
Anyone else?
Well, as trustee Whitehouse, my sense is with these protests in place, I think we have to follow the procedures here. And I would suggest, tabling these until this is resolved seems to be a reasonable course of action at this point.
Anyone else?
Is it a conflict of interest to vote on these items regarding this ordinance and also be a protester?
No, I would not think so. I mean, we've certainly disclosed it. There are concerns about the ordinance. I don't feel it is. I think you can table it, certainly. Again, that it's disclosed. If there are concerns that you think it's a conflict of interest as a trustee, you can certainly abstain.
Hey, Brad.
Yes.
This is Crystal.
Bulk motion or individual motion for each of those items?
Yeah, I would think you would need to get an item, a table for probably all six, or all four, but I'll defer to you. What would you prefer?
Who you deferring? Who? Me?
No, Crystal, what would you prefer? Would you prefer a separate motion for each one of the four?
I do have a question before we move forward with that piece. In one of the statutes, it references the ordinance may be adopted without alteration by the legislative body within 20 days following the final determination of petition sufficiency. So if we table this, are we going to be outside of that statute?
The board has said they're not going to adopt this themselves. I've already heard them say that. The mayor said he wouldn't entertain a motion. So what we would be doing is taking the proposed ordinances, which do not adopt this, they send them on to the voters. And we would be tabling them until the next meeting. Does that make sense?
Crystal, do you hear that?
Yeah. So there's
What do you think?
The regulation isn't requiring us to make a decision on those within the 20 days?
No, what the statute says is that the proposed ordinance may be adopted without alteration by the body within 20 days. As I understand it, stood it under 104, the board has said we're not going to adopt the ordinance. And if they don't adopt it, the legislative body shall forthwith publish the proposed ordinance or other ordinances published and shall refer the proposed ordinance in the form petitioned for to the registered electors. What 3 and 4 do, as I recall, and please correct me if you think I'm wrong, but 3 and 4 would refer those to the electors. And as I said, that says this will be done forthwith. I think, as I understood your discussion with the election guru in the clerk's offices today, they didn't think you could do it while a protest was pending, and thought that it ought to be put off until the next meeting and then referred to the voters.
Yeah, the special election can't be called until the protest is resolved.
Right. So if we can't, I mean, it seems to me we ought to set off 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Any other board
Okay.
members? Sounds like this. Go ahead.
As these are action items, should we ask for public comment?
We can, but we're gonna
Yeah, you should.
put them off. What's that, Brad?
Yeah, you should ask for public comment,
Okay.
and then if the board's comfortable, table them. Thank you, Ms. Key.
On all of them, or just each one at a time for public
Let's
comment?
do them one at a time. What I think I heard Crystal say is that her preference would be to get separate motions tabling 3.
Okay, we'll
and
do it
4.
separately. Let's go ahead and do that. We've already heard it. Let's just do this. We're on item D4, right? Or no, we're still on D3?
3.
Okay, the board has heard D3. Let's open it up to the public.
As a reminder, to make public comment, please raise your hand. To be
Thank
called.
you for that, Trustee Rebecca.
Diana Freeman has raised her hand. If you can state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And then you will need to unmute yourself as well. Did you raise your
This
hand?
is Rick Freeman. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
Diana, go ahead.
Actually, it's Rick.
Actually, it's Rick.
Oh, I got Diana on my screen.
I know.
Well, it lies. Anyway, this is Richard Freeman, 7425 Point Drive. I think if you'll check with your Larimer County Sheriff's Department, the Sheriff's Department will tell you every place this has been passed, there have been increases in your area of all forms of what do I want to say, criminal activity. And I think Fort Collins Police Department would agree with that. And I think that it was a small thing for our town, it seems like, but I think it could be a major influence in the future of Wellington. I have been a member of I've been a Larimer County resident since 1962. I've been in Wellington over 17 years now. I think would be a poor decision for us to look at this kind of an ordinance. And I think the town at one time did vote this down, and I think that should be continued.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I don't see any other hands raised at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board for item D3. And as I understand it, Brad,
Yes, sir.
we're going to motion to table this.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This
Until
is the ordinance concerning the regulation of retail and medical marijuana stores.
We're going to entertain a motion to table this to the 22nd meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Can I get a motion to do so?
I move, this Trustee Gator, I move that we table item 3, proposed ordinance, an ordinance concerning the regulation of retail and medical marijuana stores in the town of Wellington, to the September 22nd board meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we'll take a roll call.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes. Yes.
Crystal, can you hear us? Someone else want to take record for this? Brad?
I can. Crystal, can you hear us at all? Trustee Whitehouse, Mayor Hammond. Or I'm sorry, yeah, Trustee Knudsen was a yes. Mayor
Yes.
Hammond.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Let's move on.
Item 4.
Yep. Same thing, or do we need to go through 4?
Well, see if there's any public comment.
Public comment. Let's go to public comment on item 4.
I don't know that I can see it is my problem.
This is in particular, this is regarding the sales tax associated with those sales, just for any.
Mayor Hammond, I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay, good. Bring back to the board. Can I get a motion to table item D4 to the September 22nd meeting?
Trustee Whitehouse, I make a motion to postpone to a date definite the ordinance concerning retail marijuana sales in the town of Wellington, Colorado, to, I believe, the September 22nd meeting.
Second, Trustee Gator.
Roll call, please.
Crystal, can you hear us? I'll do it. Trustee Jerome?
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse?
Yes.
Trustee Gator?
Yes.
Trustee Kenny?
Yes.
Trustee McDonald?
Yes.
Trustee Knudsen?
Yes.
Mayor Hammond?
Yes.
Item 5. Tabling special election, calling of a special election.
We take a public comment on this?
Yep.
Okay, let's open up the public.
I see no public comment at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll take it back to the board. Can I get a motion to table resolution number 30-2020, the calling of a special election to the September 22nd meeting?
I move that we table item number 5, resolution number 30-2020, a resolution calling for a special election in the town of Wellington, Colorado, to our September 22nd board meeting. Trustee Gator.
Second.
A roll call, please.
Trustee Jerome?
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse?
Yes.
Trustee Gator?
Yes.
Trustee Kenny?
Yes.
Trustee McDonald?
Yes.
Trustee Knudsen?
Yes.
Mary Hammond?
Yes. Okay,
Last
now
but
we're
not-
on to,
Item 5.
no, are we on 5 or 6? We're on 6 now.
I apologize. Sorry about that.
Okay, open this up to the public.
Mr. Mayor, I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Can I get a motion to table resolution number 31-2020, the resolution authorizing the town clerk to appoint election judges for a special election to the September 22nd meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knudsen,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, now that brings us to item D7. Now, Brad, what are we talking about here on
This
this?
one, Reading the protest statute, which is 3111-110, as I indicated, the clerk is normally the person designated as the hearing officer. The clerk has indicated that these are primarily legal actions. The statute provides that the hearing let me just find the clerk shall serve as hearing officer unless some other person is designated by the legislative body as the hearing officer, and the testimony in each such hearing shall be under oath. But what this would do is appoint the municipal judge, and it is an appointment that would go on beyond this election. So this would generally appoint the municipal judge to hear all protests related to initiatives and referendums.
From here on out?
Yep.
For how long?
Until you change it.
Oh,
And I understand that the clerk is comfortable with that.
okay. Board members, any comments or questions?
I guess the question I had was, is the clerk's discomfort with this specific issue or with that role in general?
You know, she's got a series of things that she does. She defines the sufficiency of the petitions. She's got to run the election. There's some wisdom, I think, in having a hearing officer that is set aside from this whole process. And that's why the municipal judge made more sense, I think. And Crystal, feel free to chime in if that's not a fair statement.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Anyone else? Okay, let's open up the public comment.
Mr. Mayor, I see no hands raised at this time for public comment.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Can I get a motion to approve resolution number 32-2020, a resolution designating the municipal judge as an initiative referendum protest hearing officer?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond,
Yes. Okay. We'll move on to item D8. This is a resolution number 33-2020. It's a resolution authorizing a temporary road closure for the annual Trick or Treat Downtown Main Street event. Kelly, you going to talk about this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Hammond and Board of Trustees. So this next item is a road closure for the Trick or Treat event. This is put on by Main Street. They did have to get authorization through the county health department. So all of those considerations have been approved. This road closure would take place on Saturday of October 31st between Cleveland on 1st Street and 5th Street from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. I don't really have much else except for thanks for Main Street for putting this together. I do know that our Community Activities Commission has also offered funding for the road closure that we need through a company like Carnes, for example, because they did have leftover funds because of 4th of July. So that's another consideration that has been addressed as well.
Okay, board members, any questions or comments on this?
Point of information. I guess the resolution has the correct cross streets from 1st to 5th. So I guess that's.
The memo has an incorrect one. I know between Mr. Bacon and Ms. Cooper, they were working very diligently to make sure, you know, the proper cross streets. The memo is slightly different, but do follow the resolution. That is the correct one.
Anyone else?
So I know we had a presentation at the CAC meeting think it was last week, or I don't even remember. It's been crazy this week. Miss Cooper informed us about the event, and the CAC board was very willing that they use some of their funding to help support this. Just again, continue collaboration between the CAC and the Main Streets program. And with everything that we've had to shut down, they really like the fact that we could actually do something this year. So, and I know we do have several members of the CAC board who are on tonight, I believe, or at least, yes, I believe Mr. Bacon is on, as well as Mrs. Freeman. If you have any questions, those are members of the CAC board as well.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I love this event every year, but the safety is so very concerning. Even as an adult crossing the street with masses of people, it scares me to death. So I think not only is this a fantastic idea for this event, but this might be something that should set a precedence for future events as well. So I appreciate them seeking this option out to make sure all of our kids and families are safe.
Other board members care to comment? No? Okay, I certainly like the idea. I certainly like that everybody's gone through the proper channels, gone through the health department, done their homework, and I like it a lot. So I'm in support of doing it for sure. But anyway, let's go ahead and take it out to the public.
Mr. Mayor, I have Christy Cannon that wishes to speak.
Okay, let's
Christy,
hear
if you can state your name and address and unmute yourself, you will have time to speak.
Okay, can you hear me? It made
Yes.
I had to rejoin. Christy Cannon, 6886 Mead Street. I just wanted to thank Callie Cooper and the Main Street Board and Mayor McCaffrey with the Chamber as well for all their hard work, really thinking through the details on this and basically just laying out a really, really comprehensive plan. They did a great job, and I just wanted to give public kudos to them. So that's all. I just wanted to say thanks.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Cannon, because I feel the same way. All those people that have done this and try to make something good for the families and kids and businesses. So thank you for doing that.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, I see no other hands raised at this
Okay,
time.
we'll bring it back to the board. Can I get a motion to approve resolution number 33-2020? It's a resolution authorizing a temporary road closure for the annual trick or treat downtown Main Street. It's Main Street event.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Take a roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knudsen,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on to item D9. This is a CARES funding allocation. Oh, thought I lost the whole meeting there. Kelly, you want to talk about it?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as the board recalls, we received about $500,000 from Larimer County through the Department of Local Affairs, the CARES funding. This, I would like to thank, first of all, our finance department for working very carefully with me, Carmen and Tyler and Haley, for the constant back and forth with the state of Colorado. There is a lot of questions about this funding up until the 11th hour of trying to get these things answered. And as you also know, we were working very closely with the Chamber and Main Street that I'd like to recognize because we're continuing to get the answers back from the state. So in light of the answers that we have received and knowing what can and can't be funded, having a better grasp on this, this is my draft proposal for how we allocate these funding, the funding that we have. So for the town support, we have a variety of things that we have already spent money on. Technology for remote workers, we would like to increase that amount. We have already spent some funding on that to date. There are chemicals at the water treatment plant, as Bob has mentioned, and the whole team in Public Works. There's been increased capacity due to families staying home during the COVID incident. So we had to purchase additional chemicals for that incident that is approved by the state as well. Plexiglass to be able to open up our facilities, including our library, to get those up and going, and then general supplies of things that we have spent to date. So that's the subtotal there, about $136,000 of town supported funding that we would like to utilize. Larimer County, they have a request that is still pending that I'm waiting to hear back from them on September 11th when we have our joint regional meeting again about this. But initially they're asking each community to give back $50,000 so they can increase the testing capacity so we can get a quicker turnaround time. Again, that's a pending request from the county, but I did want to make sure that I included it in the presentation tonight. And then our next two items would be for nonprofit and business support. So what I'm proposing is that we create our own, essentially a business and nonprofit recovery program. So this would be a program run by the town staff to be able to allocate dollars directly to the businesses and nonprofits. So a nonprofit, an example is that the Wellington Food Bank, we have been working with them. I know that they have a funding request. And so they might be eligible for this program that we could allocate, assuming that they have a business address in town, et cetera. In terms of the business support program, this would be a program that it would be much more broader in scope, that they would be able to utilize funding for inventory, utility, rent, mortgage, hardware or software for remote workers, touchless payment solutions, new equipment and sanitation, PPE, et cetera. And there would be a very long list that I've looked at other communities of how we can create this program to be successful. And so with that in mind, what I'd like to do is to quickly form a committee if the board was willing to support a business and nonprofit recovery program here locally, to be able to get a small group committee to review these applications, that we would have a deadline set, say a month from now, that our group would review and then allocate those dollars appropriately, assuming that they meet all the requirements. And I've worked very closely with our other neighboring Larimer County communities and the state of Colorado to ensure this is a program that we will be able to get reimbursed dollars on. So it's a high level for at the moment, but we were working very closely up to the deadline of this meeting to get answers back from the state of Colorado. Does anyone have any questions? I know that there's a lot in there, but happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Oh, excuse me, board members, anybody got a question on any of these? These are budget amounts. We don't know exactly what everything is going for yet, but board members would like to open it up. Let's hear it.
I'm a big
Go ahead, one at a time.
Please go ahead, Trustee Kinney.
Okay. Hey, I'm a big fan of the Business Recovery Fund and the Nonprofit Recovery Fund. I like the idea that those could likely be customized to the specific needs of the businesses or nonprofits. If we do approve this, I want to volunteer to serve on that committee to assist with this process. But I do also think that good stakeholders and people who would have great outreach for these businesses would include the Wellington Main Streets program, the Chamber of Commerce as well, to serve on a committee that would help seek recipients of these recovery funds. So I do want to put that out there. And I love that we've already had a start with some of these business support programs, for example, the tables and chairs. I'm very happy to see that these dollars will go directly to assisting our businesses and our nonprofits to make sure that they continue to be successful or make sure that they continue. So that's my feedback on it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Who's next?
So this is Trustee Whitehouse. I'm supportive of what I'm seeing here, and I would reiterate the comments of Trustee Kinney regarding the business. I think it's a great idea to have the business support and nonprofit support.
Anyone else?
Yes, I had a question. I also would be willing to volunteer if there were not other trustees that wanted to serve on a committee. If we need more than one board member, I would be happy to be a part of that. I think it's a great idea. I mentioned this back several months ago that I'd like to see us supporting our businesses directly versus going through something regional. So I think this is a great way to do that. I did have a concern about a flat $50,000 going back for testing capacity. Especially looking at how the funds were distributed to the different municipalities based on size. And especially with Larimer County keeping roughly half of the funding that was received for this and then distributing the other 50% proportionate to population or some measure of that, it is a little concerning to me that we're going to be basically putting out 10% where the majority of that testing need is going to be in cities like Fort Collins and Loveland, not here in Wellington.
So John, do you think it's not proportionate is what you're saying?
Correct. If Fort Collins is paying 50,000, I think we're number 3 or 4 on the list. So we got more than other places in Justice.
Right.
But that's for us, we're looking at 10% of the funds that we received almost, whereas Fort Collins received a couple of $1 million, I believe, if not more. So that's a very, proportionally too, like we're paying 50,000, Fort Collins is paying 50,000, and they're the majority of the population that is seeing issues with cases. So it is concerning to me that we're having to be asked to put a significantly larger portion of funds towards testing.
Okay. Anyone else?
Ms. Houtling, can you tell me more about your committee? My concern would be to ensure that we don't have the same people that are applying for the funds serving on the committee. I just want to make sure that there's that separation, that the people that are applying aren't the same people that are reviewing the applications.
Yeah, that's a great point. Initially, I believe, a couple town staff members, one from finance, potentially myself, Chamber and Main Street, if they have a representative of someone that would not be applying for those funds. I think that's a really good point. We don't want to create conflict of interest through this process, but I think those partner agencies would be helpful to review the applications with us. If there is a board member that would like to serve on this, that might be also a good option, but I will definitely defer to the board of what you feel comfortable with.
Any other board members? Okay. If no one else has anything to say, it does sound like I guess I too have a little bit of Trustee Gator's question on the COVID, but maybe it's just one of those things where we got to partner up. I'm not gonna let that stop me from going forward. But I do like the idea of all of the business recovery fund, and I do like the enthusiasm about people that want to be involved. And yes, we don't want anyone with a conflict there of running the agency and also applying for money. It sounds like we got plenty of enthusiasm from members that want to be a part of that. We can talk about who's going to be on the committee later. Don't need to decide that tonight. But I am totally behind this whole thing. Can't wait to do it. So if there's nothing else, I'd like to turn it over to some public comment unless someone wants to bring something up.
I'll quickly bring up that
Yep.
Since I am going back to the county on September 11th, I will let them know that we do have reservations about this, and I'll communicate back to the Board of Trustees of what I hear from the other communities, because they might feel the same exact way as you all do, or as a couple of our board members do. And so it might not be a point at all moving forward, but I'll definitely communicate that back and let them know that I don't have 100% consensus on this issue.
That's good. That's a good call, Kelly. All right, let's take it out to the public.
Mayor Hammond, Hallie Cooper with the Main Street Program like to speak.
Okay. I'm not hearing anything.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry that took me a second. I just wanted to say thank you to Kelly for putting this together. I really appreciate it. I can speak for myself. I would love to be a part of that review committee for those applications. We would not be an organization at this time that would be applying directly for direct funding. And so I would love to be a part of supporting the businesses, and especially a part of disseminating that information and getting that information out to them as far as what their needs are. So thank you for putting this together, and thank you, Board of Trustees, for your consideration for giving this money back to our businesses. It's vital, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Kelly. Look forward to seeing you out there. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, I have no other hands raised at this time.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board.
Written comment by Melissa Whitehouse.
All right, is there something I don't see it? Where was it at?
I'll read it. Melissa Whitehouse, 3922 Grant Avenue. As part of the CARES funding, will there be a line item for allocating funds for dispensing COVID-19 vaccines? Does to Wellington residents if there is a vaccine that becomes available? We do have to spend this money by the end of the year. We also have a balance at this point of $56,000 roughly. So say a vaccine did become available, that would be fantastic before the end of the year. That is something that we could certainly consider, but that's why we have some remaining funds just in case something comes up between now and the end of December.
Okay. Good question. All right, let's bring it back to the board. Can I get a motion to approve the CARES Act funding allocation as presented here tonight?
I will make a motion that we approve the CARES funding plan as presented by staff.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Yes. All right, thank you for that. You guys got me down for the record there, Kelly? Okay.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks again for getting that done, Kelly. It's a big deal. We appreciate it. I know everybody's going to appreciate having a hand in it. All right, so we're going to move on. I got 8:28, and we're going to exit our regular meeting and enter the Liquor License Review Board for the annual renewal of Sol de Lisco. And to do that, we're going to need a roll call.
Trustee Gator,
Here.
Trustee Jerome,
Here.
Trustee Kenny,
Present.
Trustee McDonald,
Here.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Here.
I'm
Mayor
here.
Hammond.
I'm here. Okay, Brad, want to tell us what's going on here?
Certainly. Hold on, let me get you my fancy picture. This is simply a renewal for Sol de Lisco. The staff has gone through the renewal application. The sheriff's report is there. There haven't been any significant incidents, and the renewal seems to be in order.
Okay. Do we need to hear from Sol de Lisco? I don't know if they're probably on tonight, right?
Sure
We don't need to
can.
hear from. Okay. Board members have anything to comment on here?
This include their expansion for the patio that we just approved
Go ahead.
a couple of months ago?
This is merely a renewal. That's a temporary application, as I recall. And again, I'll
Okay.
let the clerk chime in. So as a result of that, all you're doing is renewing the existing license.
Okay, thank
We
you.
discussed last time, one of the things we're doing is we're somewhat taking the renewal a different path. If you guys elect not to renew it, then we'd have a hearing.
Okay.
So
Any quick issues before we put it to a vote? Okay, can we take a vote on renewing the annual? Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, point of information, is there public comment for this or not?
certainly should be.
There should be?
Yeah.
Okay then,
Open the public.
state out to the public.
Mr. Mayor, I see no hands raised at this time.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Can I get a motion to approve the liquor license for annual renewal for Sol de Lisco?
So moved.
Second.
Let's have a roll call.
Trustee Gator,
Yes.
Trustee Jerome,
Yes.
Trustee Kenny,
Yes.
Trustee McDonald,
Yes.
Trustee Whitehouse,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Hammond.
Yes. Okay. I got 8:31. We're going to exit our liquor review board and resume our regular Board of Trustees meeting. We'll move on to category F, the reports. The town attorney, anything quick?
Very quickly, just by way of updating the board, we had the Jacobs Engineering contract that came before the board. The board approved that, subject to my review, Kelly's review, and Bob's input. Dave Meyer did an absolutely wonderful job, went back, and I believe staff is comfortable. Engineers are somewhat famous at I think they spend more time in seminars with lawyers than perhaps lawyers do on limitations of liability. Some of that's based upon their insurers. We modified the contract, which I don't think any of us felt were perfect, but I think the staff felt it was acceptable, such that the insurance stays in place. The potential liability goes from the amount we pay on the contract to a $10 million potential liability. We, however, do retain the fact that the consultant shall have no liability to the town for contingent, consequential, indirect damages, including damages for loss of use, revenue, or profit, operating costs, and facilities downtime, however that may be caused. I think Mr. Meyer felt that was about as far as he could get it, so those provisions are still in there, but based upon that, the staff is inclined to accept the contract. So if there's any huge concern, speak now, but this has to get moving, was what the board that was the message we got. Other than that, I don't have anything.
Okay, any board members want to ask any questions about the Jacobs contract? You don't care to hear about engineering issues? Okay. They don't, Bob. Nobody wants to hear it. All right, town administrator.
Bob.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So tonight is Mr. Sexton's last night as interim finance director, and I just wanted to take a moment to recognize him. If we were in person, I'd bring you over a really beautiful plaque, Tyler. If you're still on the line, first of all, I don't know if you are or not, but you've done such an outstanding job to hold down the fort during this time. Thank you so much for your hard work. I know this has been incredibly hard to do this position during a global pandemic. So thank you, Tyler. I sincerely mean that. And thank you for being a part of our team.
Can we have the screen back? Looks great, by the way.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Are you leaving?
Just going back to my old position.
You know, duty starts tomorrow.
I thought another one was gone. No, we can't have that. Good job, Tyler. Thank you very much. It's been a big deal. I know it. You really did good. A lot of questions, hard ones. I think you got some good public speaking as a result of the whole thing.
All right, that's all. Thank you.
We'll be by and see you in person here. Thank you for doing that, Kelly. Laramie County Sheriffs.
Good evening,
We
Mayor.
have a report. Does that start? Yeah, go ahead. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
You've got the monthly report there for July. As you can see, overall our, calls in July were up, and we had huge amount of support from the deputies outside of Wellington to help with that, because we've been short a couple people with military leave and other leave during this time. So we managed to get through it, and they all did a great job. So hopefully the fires will die down and we won't all be working 20 hours extra each week. But that is what it is, and open for any questions anyone has about the July report.
Any questions for Sergeant Reardon? Doesn't look like it, sir. I want to thank you very much for doing your hard work and your whole team, okay?
Did have
We
a
might
quick
say so in
question.
person. Go ahead, Trustee Gator.
I just noticed that there's several areas where we've seen an increase in crime. The most disturbing one for me is the sexual assault. That we saw that rise from an average of 1 over the last 3 years to 5 this year already. Are we doing something to try and work on that? Have we figured out what's driving that, or do we have some information on what's going on there?
When numbers are small like that, when you're averaging, 1 a month in past years, and you get a blip like that, a rise in 1 month, it's hard to put a finger on it, because the thing about sexual assault reports is sometimes they're not contemporaneous. Maybe something that's being reported that occurred, several years ago or, a month ago. It's not necessarily something that happened at the time of the report. It's different than a lot of crimes that way. But I can say that they're not, as is the case of most sexual assaults, it's not like stranger rapes that we're seeing.
Okay, that was mainly my concern, if there's action that we need to be taking to make sure that this doesn't become a bigger problem.
Nothing that I could identify. Like I say, the majority of them are known, either family members or acquaintances of the victims.
Thank you, Sergeant. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go to the board report. Does the board members have anything special they want to recommend or say, or quickly, briefly, if you don't mind?
This is Trustee Whitehouse. I had a couple of questions regarding the citizens initiatives. Have those been posted to the town website is one question. And the other one is regarding apparently there's 2 protests that have been lodged against these initiatives. I mean, will those be published on the website, or at least be given to, distributed to the trustees?
That would be the intent. We need to get what we may do is see if we can set up something separate on the website with both the protests and the petitions on there. What we wanted to do is get something back to the proponents, and as I said, we've been missing each other since Friday. So we'll try and get them on as soon as we can.
Mr. March, is there any reason that we have to wait to talk to them before posting that information? Especially
Probably not. No, I don't believe there is. We got 10 pounds of potatoes and 5 pounds of sack has been the problem lately.
Yeah. If we could get that up, that would be much appreciated, because I know the first time I actually saw any of these petitions that we were potentially supposed to vote on tonight was when I received the board packet on Sunday.
Fair enough.
So it would be good for this information to be available not only to the trustees, but also to the public.
Understood.
Anyone else?
I do have to raise some concern regarding it too, and just because this is a big deal and this is a citizen initiative, and ideally in my mind for a citizen initiative is I want the people to decide, for the vote to go to the people. So, but with that said, I'm still feeling a little hairy about conflict of interest. I just want to make sure this is super clean. There's no questions later on. So I would like us to look into that further, for specifically for Trustee Jerome, if he is a protester, what that means for him making board decisions and voting on it with that position in mind. I mean, it might be fine, I don't know. But like I said, I just want it to be clean. I want to make sure we thoroughly consider it, just to make sure that when and if citizens do have the opportunity to make a decision, it won't ever come back to the board saying there was a conflict of interest.
That's a fair concern. Why don't I try and give you a call tomorrow? We can kind of chat it through.
So I would like to clarify on conflict of interest, and Mr. March can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain that conflict of interest is tied to financial gain in a situation. So if it were a situation where Trustee Jerome had something financially to gain by the proposal going through, that would create a conflict. But my understanding of the laws of for us regarding our ethics rules in our code, that only deals with financial gain. It doesn't deal with you have a particular opinion. But again, I could be wrong, but that's my understanding of how those rules work.
That's certainly a component. There's a series, including constitutional issues, one of which certainly focuses on financial gain. There's also a town ordinance. Let me take a peek at that, and Trustee Kenny, I'll give you a call in the morning.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
I did
Okay,
have,
Bradford. Go ahead, John.
So two things. One, I just wanted to reiterate the thank you to Mr. Sexton for the work he's done, especially with the detailed financial reports we've been getting at the end of every month. That is incredibly helpful. So I'm very glad that we will be retaining you, even though you're going back to your old position. You've done a great job. So thank you for that. My second question is, do we have any ideas when we will be able to go back to doing meetings in person?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. I don't know. I'm just kind of following the guidance of what other communities are doing. Everyone else is on Zoom. So I don't have a good answer.
Commissioners are doing a hybrid version. They're in person with staff, and some folks are coming in, to do testimony or whatever in person. And then some people are doing it on Zoom. The big thing that I think the big challenge that we run into right now is we don't have the technology to bridge that gap. I don't know if, like I said, I watched the whole NISP proceedings last week, and they obviously have an audio visual person who is doing camera changes and all that type of stuff, which, we don't even own equipment that like. So I don't know how we could really do it without investing that kind of money and being able to do something like that. In my opinion, anyway.
Well, we just kick it around, Kelly, see what makes sense until we figure it out. This is what we're going to do.
Yep.
Yeah, I would agree with Trustee Jerome's sentiment. If you recall, we did have one meeting that was both a hybrid in person, and then also we were taking comments on Facebook Live. There was a 2-minute lag. The public did not feel that they were responded to properly. It seemed like we were not being transparent because we didn't see the comments come in. So if we had a robust IT staff and communications team and the right technology, we don't even have the proper internet to be able to run that meeting at the Leaper Center at this point. So due to our small town feel, that also has limitations as it relates to the robust technology team that would require that professionalism behind that type of broadcast.
Well, we'll go until we get it, right? I guess we'll just keep working at it. I don't know, John. I kind of like that big microphone you got going over there.
All right. No one else? Wait, I think it's important to say summer's over. It's snowing outside. Okay, I got fire on. Let's hope it helps put out that fire so we can see the sunset one of these days. Okay. There's nothing else. We have no executive session tonight, so I'd like to take a motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:46.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Have a nice evening. Thank you, guys.